They'll be dependent upon government policy changes and what the United States at the highest levels wants to do with the frozen assets. It's such a difficult landscape to predict that in one of the cases involving victims who are suing Iran, the Congress literally changed the law during the course of the litigation because it was going on for so many years, and there have been successful recoveries against the Castro regime as well. So the short answer is there's a lot of money, there are a lot of victims. Ultimately, how that turns out could depend more on the Congress and the President than on the courts.
I've known Kendall for a long time. We come from opposite sides of the table. When it comes to legal issues, I defer. I mentioned earlier about how there are many Republicans who are saying things that I think reflect Russian propaganda. People I truly respect. I'm a devout Catholic. I'm actually in a master's program for theology right now. I told Donald Trump that, and he looked at me like I was crazy. He's like, well, you're going to be a priest? I was like, no, I have children. So, but for me, I watched propaganda overtake the Catholic Church. You know, Catholic commentators, we call them traditional Catholic or Twitter Catholics, right? Who are out there saying that we should not be giving money to Ukraine, right? And others who were saying, you sound like a Putinist. I've watched two Catholics almost tear each other apart and try to get each other fired. One an academic, one a reporter, over messages that were clearly coming straight out of the Kremlin, to my mind, right? This is not happening in the Congress. The Republicans are remarkably united with Democrats on aid to Ukraine. Remarkably. I think this might change. We're going to have about 50 more freshman Republicans. Some of them are going to come from probably, the wrong side of that debate. It would be great if we could remove immunity before November. It's not going to happen. But I think it's very possible that the Congress can do the right thing. It's remarkably unified, and even if the Republican Congress becomes in charge, the Republicans become in charge of the House and perhaps the Senate, most likely the House, even if they do elect some rather anti-Ukraine, like isolationist Republicans, I think it can still be done. I think it would be unusual, right, Kendall? But I think it's entirely possible. And if we do it, Katie barred the door. I mean, I think that we could really, truly do great things for Ukraine with Russian money, and the poetry of that just makes me very happy.
Yeah, it's now we have damages, $200 billion. It's damages to our infrastructure, to supply chains, to private households, to business. I know it directly because my father under Russian sanctions and our territory is occupied at Kherson region, so I know it also from my personal experience, unfortunately. And this also I must mention on this conference, that situation which now we have in Kherson region, it's not so loudly terror like in Bucha, but it's very hidden terror under occupation. It's the same thing like in Bucha, but very high. So they take all activists, they broken their legs, they kidnap it, they come to houses and villages and take cows and other stuff. So it's the same, unfortunately, in my region where I'm like taking part in election only 5 months ago. So I know these people directly. And if some also Americans who see us wanted to help directly to our people in Kherson or donate money to them to transfer some way because we can't give their humanitarian aid, please do that, because people in Ukraine, you must understand that people in villages live for $50 a month, so when they work. So they really need this help now, and we can help. Also, we will present project Ukrainian humanitarian headquarters, which connect different projects and fundraising not only for one project, but for different projects. For example, also if religious organizations do these projects, like rabbi or priest, we support them. Also, we support people who buy body armor for territorial defense, like people who do psychological aid for raped women. It's true, yeah, and they also need support, because without our support, unfortunately, these programs will be closed, because now it's all money from middle business, and as you know, business also not so good here. So thank you one more time. Please, questions.
Because I have a very good friend in Kiev, and on the fourth day of the
Can I bring this to you? I want some people to hear it.
so when I think of the war, and you were talking about colors, and it's blue for you, to me it's spinning black, because I have a very good friend who lives in Kiev, and on the fourth day of the war I received luckily an erroneous message that said her apartment complex had been hit by a Russian missile, and it was a tremendous shock for me. And it took me a few days to actually find out that she was still alive, which was then almost like the Ukrainian colors with yellow, it was bright and positive. But I had met with her, and I call it the good old days, which was only in December last year, with her and with the head of the Ukrainian PPP unit at a big international conference on PPPs in Istanbul. And it was so ironic for me where they were presenting on the Ukrainian plan for PPPs to improve the port facilities on the Black Sea to export grain to the rest of the world. 3 cities stand out to me: Mariupol, Kherson, Nikolaev, and then actually a fourth one, Odessa. Only one of those ports today can even function.
Yeah.
And so when I start thinking of PPPs, which is my area of expertise, I just wonder, and that's the question for the two panelists, or the three, is when we get into, and I'm trying to be positive, into the reconstruction phase of Ukraine, this will happen eventually, and in the recovered territories, which I firmly believe will happen, there's going to be a tremendous need for industries, infrastructure companies from all over the world to get involved, and it's most likely going to have to take place through public-private partnerships.
Sure.
Because the Ukrainian government's not going to have the funding to do this. What type of lobbying do you think should be done, especially with your experience of having been a lobbyist in the Ukraine? What type of lobbying do you think, what effective methods or strategies should be done so that this can be achieved? And that's a very long question, but
I can begin the answer. Kendall probably can do a better job, but I was at a conference, wherever it was, Florida somewhere, where the Biden administration's FEMA director was. I know FEMA doesn't typically get involved in international issues. Sometimes they do. I've seen them on the ground in former Soviet Union. And I asked her, I said, will FEMA get involved in recovering Ukraine? She said it will almost entirely come from the United States Agency for International Development, but also some will come from the Department of Defense. Those are the two buckets it will come from. So both of them require congressional lobbying. There's existing funds, but not 200 billion. And by the way, of course, the United States is not going to pay the whole bill, but what's going to happen, and this is the way I understand it, is that the Zelensky administration will make a request, and the bills will be paid by foreign governments. But I also think, Kendall, and maybe you know more about this, we've spoken to some friends of ours who say that some of those requests may come from regional governors or cities. For example, a hospital in Bucha, let's say, is level to the ground. And the schools in Bucha are absolutely gone. Why would a family come home? They can't send their children to school, and they can't go to a hospital if they get sick. So if you want to reunite families, those are the things that need to be fixed. Does that come from Zelensky, or does that come from the mayor of Bucha? I mean, it's a very complex question. I'm not quite sure how Ukraine will work on this.
Yeah, so it's also the last question, yeah, and it's the same question which our members of parliament have. So how it will work, this Marshall's plan? Because also I understand that we can't